And you might ask a question of the Taoiseach. I want to make a statement, starting with the fact that our hearts goes out to the families of those 36 people who died yesterday. And it was interesting, Cancorla, the other day listening to radio, and I think it was Ryan Tubridy was on an interview with someone, and the person asked, how is Ireland at the moment? And one of the things he said just in a short response is, it's good because our political system listens to health advice. And it just struck me as a very simple truth. That is important, that is a good thing. And it's worrying, therefore, that while there's a lot of good signs, the fact that the ICU numbers are down and the transmission rates are down, but those numbers of deaths yesterday announced was a real shock, I think. Well, an ongoing shock for everyone. And that Dr. Tony Hoolan is saying, as I understand today, that if he was to give advice tomorrow on terms of whether we'd ease the restrictions that are due on the 18th of May, he'd be reluctant to do so is a concern. And that he says that there's still community transmission, we can see it in the numbers, is also a concern. I also heard today, you hear different things, I think it was Alistair Campbell in the UK saying that, okay, yes, follow the scientific advice, and he needs to know, but we need to know the science, we need to know the figures. I say by that as a way of a long introduction, maybe to referencing Deputy Howland beside me, because he introduced the Open Government Partnership, as I recall, back in 2011. And I do think in the following scientific advice and in maybe returning or really emphasising that capability to provide open government, and particularly around information in a scientific way, is very important in this time. And I connect that, if I can, Corla, to another comment in recent weeks from our President, Michael de Higgins, who, in I think a very important article in the Sunday Business Post, referred to a report from the National Economic and Social Council that I think gives us a map for some of the ways we can manage the recovery here. To quote the President, if that's not running into difficulty, says, the report that NESC provides is a map for recovery exists. Let us be wise enough to use it. And that report, again, the reason why I'm connecting this is because it refers to two areas of transformation that will help in the recovery. One is in relation to our reduction in climate emissions, tackling that huge challenge. But the second is around the whole issue of digitalisation and how we, as a country, make sure we deliver a just transition in that, as well as in our approach to climate change. And the two are connected. And that, I think, as we start to manage the opening up of our recovery, does give us a guide as to where to go. And put simply, I think, if I was to simplify down some of the recommendations within the report, which the President describes as important as the one as Whitaker wrote in going from this country being a closed economy to an open economy, this is steering us on a map from going from being an unsustainable one to a sustainable one. But it very much emphasises the local, the need to work at a local level in devising this transformation. It refers, I think, or it would reiterate what I think the European Commission and others have been promoting, open innovation, they call it, Open Innovation 2.0, where there are 4 strands of cooperation you need, with the state centrally involved, with business, with academia, and with local communities and with citizens. And I mention that because I think that is how our recovery will work. It will start from the bottom up. It's important that we support particularly small and local businesses, that working with our universities, working with the state, working with other local people, agencies of the state, we can and will turn this economy around. And doing it in a way that uses the solidarity we've shown in response to this crisis is what we need to do. And that relates, first and foremost, I think, to the health system. What we've seen in how we've managed our health system in this last 2 months is just such an example of how innovation, we can be good at this. The fact that we've turned around our health system very quickly and been able to build new extra capacity in the ways that we would never think that we could do in the timelines we've done is just such an example of such innovation. The use of such digital technology now, Taoiseach, I recall you speaking recently about how online clinics are now being done in a way that haven't been done previously, and we should maintain that capability. The fact that as we introduce contact tracing apps, we have to have the trust and confidence of our people that actually this is really good digital innovation is going to be critical for managing the continuing suppression of the virus. So I'm sorry if that sounds slightly abstract, but the ability to innovate and the ability to involve our local communities and our businesses and our universities and the state in such a four-stranded approach to innovation is going to be the key to recovery. And that starts, more than anything else, with collaboration in the political space and actually cooperation with our local government and with all our parties, so that we're all in that sort of collaborative, innovative approach to the recovery ahead of us. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.
Deputy Joe O'Brien.
Ceann Comhairle, I do have questions and I will leave some time for some answers. Taoiseach, I refer to the situation of thousands of people in institutional communal accommodation called direct provision. And I note this in the context of a huge national and governmental effort to tackle COVID-19, where there's been a huge communication campaign to inform everyone about what they need to do in terms of social distancing and how to protect their health and protect the health of their communities. It's also in the context of government releasing an unprecedented amount of funding to protect people's incomes, their livelihoods and their lives, and taking dramatic steps that have never been taken before. So it is in these contexts that it is particularly difficult to understand the government's response to people living in direct provision. Taoiseach, my figures tell me that there are 1,800 people still sharing a bedroom with people they are not related to and do not know. My first question is, can you confirm this? The HSE came up with a new definition of household in order to work around Tony Holohan's advice that social distancing is not possible for people in communal bedrooms such as these. It would now appear that a household can mean a group of people who have never met before, are from different countries, speak different languages, didn't choose to live with each other, and naturally don't have the knowledge of each other's movements and activities during the day. Frankly, it's scandalous in these wider contexts that I have outlined that this fudge has been actively implemented where people, despite their best efforts, and I spoke to a man this morning who was in desperation trying to comply with social distancing in a direct provision setting, that this is actually happening. And it's causing a huge risk to their health and active damage to their mental health, which in many cases was already under severe strain. How would we all feel if we were unable to actually comply with the social distancing measures that have been asked of us in the last few weeks? Now, I understand, but I don't agree with the communal accommodation setup that has been the way that is direct provision, but it is inconsistent with public health needs at the moment. What's more, the fact that a new centre was set up during the pandemic, which forced people into communal bedroom situations, is mind-boggling when we are supposed to be pulling out all the stops. Taoiseach, I have figures of 5,866 people in direct provision and another 1,585 protection applicants in emergency accommodation. Can you clarify how many of these people have been tested, how many have tested positive, and how many have now been provided with their own bedroom where they can isolate? The approach to protecting people's health in direct provision is an active failure, and we now have a legal opinion emerging from the Irish Refugee Council contending that it is also a breach of various human rights commitments. It's not that the government didn't move fast enough or didn't understand the reality. It's that you knew it wasn't the best approach and you carried on anyway. Taoiseach, we must do better.
Thanks very much, Deputy. I'm afraid I can't confirm those exact numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but they may well be correct. They certainly sound like they are correct. The definition of a household or a bubble, as some countries use, is not unique to Ireland. Essentially, from a public health point of view, the household, your household, or your bubble, as some countries are now referring to it, are the people you live with, because it's virtually impossible to maintain a social distance from people who you live with. And there are lots of people who share a house with people who they're not related to, and they are considered the one household. And there are many people who share a room with somebody they're not related to, and they are considered to be the one household or the one bubble, because it's not practical to socially distance and isolate yourself from people you live with, whether it's the same house or the same room. You are therefore considered to be a household or a bubble. So there was no change of definition there. It was always a definition, and it's just common sense if you think about it from a public health point of view, and applies whether you're in direct provision or not. It doesn't matter what language you speak. Your household is the people you live with, and if you share a room, that's your household or your bubble. In relation to people who need to be isolated, City West is available, and people have been isolated there, and there is capacity there, and also the possibility of isolating people in hotels if they need to be isolated. Again, I don't have exact figures in front of me. I'll correspond with the Deputy and provide him with those figures. In relation to direct provision, I don't think anyone in this House believes that direct provision is a good system. And I absolutely believe it should be one of the objectives of the next government to put an end to it. But it's easier said than done. There is a shortage of accommodation in the country, and it's difficult to predict the number of people in any given week, month or year that are going to come in from overseas and may need accommodation.